Hello, I'm Emmet Ryan and welcome to the first and what's going to be a weekly series here on the Business Post website looking ahead to the weekend in sport. And this week we've got a big one ahead, of course, the big fight over in Vegas, and join me to discuss that. And the other big fight on the card are Chris Fields, former Cage Warriors world champion, and Mark O'Toole, not a former Cage Warriors world champion, but an accomplished MMA journalist in his own right. Guys, thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
And Chris, you've trained with Conor, you fought at a high level as well. But before we get to that fight, I want to ask you about the co-main event, which is a pretty huge fight in its own right. Middleweight world title, Chris Weidman, the defending champion, against Luke Rockhold. For people who aren't too aware really of these fighters who are watching this, tell us a bit about them and what to expect from this fight.
Yeah, Chris Weidman beat Anderson Silva, who was the best pound-for-pound fighter that had ever existed. Literally the best guy to ever do the sport. And Weidman beat him, and since then has been on a bit of a tear. Up to then had been on a tear. Fantastic fighter, kind of mixes boxing mainly with really good wrestling and really good jiu-jitsu. Rockhold is a former Strikeforce world champion, phenomenal kickboxer, really good dexterity and good high kicks and stuff. Again, himself, very good wrestling, very good jiu-jitsu. So I kind of think this fight might take place on the feet, and I'm going to go out on a limb and probably say something that a lot of people won't agree with, but I think Rockhold might win by TKO.
So Mark, why would the likes of Chris, be thinking like Rockhold, he's an underdog, but he's got a chance at winning this fight?
Well, I think you have to take this in context, and the context is that, as Chris rightly said, Chris Weidman pulled off a shot defeat against Anderson Silva, and then backed it up with another win over him. So you're seeing the longest reigning champion, the longest winning streak in the UFC, in Anderson Silva, end. So the middleweight division has been in a state of flux, and we're still waiting to see who's really the big dog. It's quite an open division at the moment, and you have seen the younger fighters, the up-and-coming guard for a long time, like Weidman and Rockhold, kind of vie for a position for this. So what we're really seeing is that changing of the guard, and I to be honest, I actually agree with Chris until I've seen the UFC Embedded series, which they put out every week, and Weidman looks very, very focused, whereas, and I know we can...
But doesn't every fighter come in on his best camp ever? Don't we all say that?
Yeah, and I feel like in the videos you can see Chris Weidman has got his regular routine, but Rockhold seems to be focusing a lot on Weidman and thinking about what he's going to do rather than going out and try and prove his best. I think Chris Weidman's got a tiny bit more confidence from what I've seen in terms of how he's spoken about the fight, and it'll be a very interesting fight to see in terms of, if you take the last biggest card of the year, which Conor was also main eventing against Chad Mendes, the fight underneath it was arguably the fight of the year, Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald, which was for the welterweight title. So we could see a pretty exciting fight. I think we will. I think we'll see some really good stand-up game in it. And I disagree with Chris, but only as of this week.
So sorry, just want to butt in, because I actually trained in American Kickboxing Academy, aka where Rockhold fights out of. And when I came home from there, I was telling everyone about him and Ken Velasquez at the time, just their work ethic, how good they were in the gym, how good they were to spar with. They were just phenomenal athletes. And I think Rockhold had a setback against Vitor Belfort, and then it's just been on a tear since. And
Vitor, a very clean athlete who's never ever
exactly, and he was doing that dodgy stuff when he fought Rockhold. But the guys do share a couple of opponents, and one of them being Lyoto Machida, who Weidman struggled with and who Rockhold absolutely destroyed, absolutely dominated and destroyed. So I think that for me was in my head. I went, right, Rockhold's the next champion.
The big fight, of course, everybody though is looking forward to on the Irish side is Conor McGregor finally getting in the octagon with Jose Aldo. Please, MMA Twitter, don't give out. I just inadvertently nearly said the C word there. Please be nice. But he's finally getting in the octagon with Jose Aldo, assuming, because it's got about 48 hours before the fight's going to be on, that Aldo has managed to get hurt again. And hopefully we won't have more raging people, kind of rightly so, at a short notice, because they'd all flown over to Vegas already the last time, and he won't be for a interim belt, which I know Conor, you're saying, isn't too fond of that title.
Yeah, no, he believes he's the champion. Everyone from our camp believes he's the champion. The guy, he showed up. Aldo hadn't defended the belt in so long that, any title, you only have a certain amount of time to defend it. He hadn't defended it within that time, so that's why Conor got the belt.
And Mark, obviously, for Conor, it's been a longish road, because people, because he's a young guy, but youth and sort of these things are relative terms. Because Conor's actually been fighting quite a long time and been training for this for a long time. So for him to finally get this shot, I suppose, for him it's almost a relief that he's finally actually getting in the octagon with Aldo. That it's not having to worry about, is Aldo broken again.
Yeah, well, I think Chris has rightly pointed out there, the big variable of this fight is how long Jose Aldo has been out for and how he's going to react to that. He's been out of the octagon for 15 months, and in that meantime, Conor has had 2 fights, has been building up, has been focusing his game plan for Jose Aldo, and in the meantime has won that interim belt. He doesn't see it that way. Yeah, we'll try to be careful. Take it easy on
He could hurt me, so I'm not going to say anything.
But he has won that belt. He won it on very short notice against a fighter that was a completely different style of fighter than the one he was preparing for, and perhaps even a more dangerous style of fighter. So what we've seen is Conor's game evolving in that meantime, whereas we don't know where Jose Aldo's game is at. What we do know is Jose Aldo has been in a lot of wars. His last fight against Chad Mendes was the fight of the year, unquestionably. It was 5 rounds, and it took a lot out of him, and we don't know how much. He's been gone for 15 months, and training is very different to actually being in the octagon. Conor has been in the octagon. He's been very impressive in the octagon, and he's been trying new things out and evolving his style. I feel he's very composed for this fight. I don't know how to read Jose Aldo at the moment. What I do think is Conor can be more confident against Jose Aldo because it'll be more of a stand-up fight than the Chad Mendes fight is going to be, and that's where Conor is strongest and where he's got, pound for pound, the best punch in the UFC.
And Chris, obviously you've been in big fights, you've gone in situations where, it's like your first time going for a title, and obviously not this scale title, but still pretty big deal in its own right, like the Cage Warriors World Championship. So for you, like, you're thinking, you're Conor going into this fight now, whether it's thinking he's a champion or thinking he's got to prove something, like, how does he prepare for a fight like this now? You're sort of in the last 48 hours.
What Conor puts out as a public persona is not fake. Like, he actually, honestly, is like that. That's how the mindset. I don't mean the craziness around the mindset though. He believes the champion. I'd be at home stressed to death. Conor will take all this on his shoulders. All these Irish people coming over, everything. It won't faze him at all. I do disagree with Mark on one thing. I actually don't think it's going to be a stand-up fight. I think Aldo's going to get cracked early and he's going to look for the takedown, because I think Aldo's a phenomenal fighter. I've been a fan of his for years. Obviously it's an awkward situation then if you're a fan of someone, he's fighting one of your friends, but I just think none of them know how hard Conor hits. And I've sparred with a lot of guys through the years. I've fought some of the hardest hitting middleweights there is.
And you're a much bigger guy than Conor. That's the key thing to point out here.
He has cement in his hands. Honestly, he really does, because you hear people going, "Oh, that guy took a dive." That guy. It doesn't look like much, but when he hits you, nearly every shot's a knee wobbler. And I think as soon as one of them touch Aldo, he's going to go, "I can't do that." So now it's wrestle, and that's where I think the fight will go downhill for Aldo, because I think he'll then resort to wrestling, which he's not that fit for, and he'll gas as the fight goes on.
I actually remember Chris saying a couple of years ago when I was talking to him about Conor and who hits hardest in SBG, the gym that the lads are all from, and he didn't even have to answer the question. He was like, who hits the hardest pound for pound, and that was a good point that was made by Conor's kind of striking coach and the guy that he works with quite constantly, Chris's teammate Owen Roddy. It's a 25-minute championship bout. Conor only needs that one opportunity to hit him, and that will change the game. What I'd be really interested in your opinion on, Chris, is we've seen Conor perhaps needling Jose Aldo a tiny bit less this week. We've seen him be a little bit more calm. Every fight that we've seen since Conor's been a world champion on Cage Warriors, when he won against Dave Hill, he's been needling that champion. He's been playing the mind games. How would you read the fact that he's not doing that much this week?
I think when you watch the weigh-ins tomorrow, it's going to be a different story. Conor at a weigh-in.
He's throwing it all up, is he?
He'll walk out there at the weigh-in, and that atmosphere, all those Irish people. I couldn't do what Conor does. If I walked up and got in someone's face the way Conor does, I'd be sitting on that all night. It'd be stewing in me, and I'd be burning energy. Conor does that, walks outside, he's gone. Not a bother on him. It all happens at that moment, and then I've been there at weigh-ins with him. He gets back in the bus, and he's just like, "All right, that was good crack, wasn't it?" And I'd be at home burning up energy all night. He's a weird human. He's a weird human.
And obviously, looking at you talk about how the fight's going to play out. For Conor, one of the reasons, of course, he hits hard is he's a two-weight former champion with Cage Warriors. Do you think, no matter what way this fight goes, whether he beats Aldo or whether he loses, he doesn't believe he can lose. We are well aware of this.
Yeah.
But either way, he's going to be thinking maybe I should be looking at lightweight in the next year to year and a half.
Yeah, he has voiced that a few times. I think the move's going to happen pretty soon. He's got a very big frame for featherweight. You see him when
it's very big for featherweight. I was going to say.
Yeah, when you see him size up with the guys.
And I'm used to having a big frame, people.
But you see him stand when they do square offs. He's always a good few inches taller, and his shoulders are a lot wider. I think he'll have as much success at lightweight just by his frame.
But also realistically, if we look at that division, the only other fight that's there is Frankie Edgar, who's fighting Chad Mendes this weekend. If Chad Mendes wins that, don't know if there is a point for.
And Edgar's also an ex-lightweight, so even then, like, they could, realistically look at it. Well, this fight is one we can keep for later on, like.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so it's the last thing, critical part. I have a funny feeling I know how the picks are going to go here, but so it's who and how method of victory.
Well, look, we're all. I think I'm probably a little bit biased in this, having covered Conor from his days fighting in Cage Contender on the local circuit in Tala here, from onwards to the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, this mecca of fighting. I think before the fight in the summer, I was a tiny bit worried, but when he came out and put on a display against Chad Mendes, where he knocked him out in the second round, I'm more confident he's able to deal with a fighter of Jose Aldo's style, as accomplished that Jose Aldo is. And there's just so many question marks over Jose Aldo at the moment that I would, if I was a betting man, I think there is more value to be had betting on Conor, on what we know about Conor.
And on points, the TKO, how are you seeing it?
I would see a TKO in the second or third round.
Okay, and Chris, pretty safe guessing here you're going to go, but just tell us how you see it's going to finish up here.
I think they'll exchange in the middle at the start. I think Aldo's going to come out like a bit of a lunatic, and they'll crack a couple of times, and then I think Aldo will look for the takedown. That'll kind of get him through the first round. Second round, maybe rattled a few times, and I think early third TKO for Conor.
Okay, well, Chris, Mark, I think we've got pretty much near unanimity in the picks. Even Mark with his Weidman pick is tentative, I think it's fair to say. Personally, I'm actually thinking Weidman's going to crush Rockhold. Sorry, Chris, but what do I know?
Well, there's only one middleweight world champion in the room, and we're
But I'm ineligible. That's the only reason. I'm ineligible to be middleweight.
I wouldn't be crazily surprised if it happened, but I do see, for some reason, I see Rockhold doing that.
But I would largely be in agreement with you guys in terms of the Conor winning, but also the second, third round direction I think is about right. So guys, thanks for joining me, and of course we'll be back next week with sadly nothing anywhere near as big as previewing a world title fight, but it'll still be good, I promise. So come back to us next Friday with the next weekend sport look ahead, where hopefully we'll have people who are maybe a tenth as qualified to talk about their top as Chris.